Welcome to the Ed Policy Committee meeting for May. It's May already, who would believe it? I'd like to acknowledge and recognize the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. Could I get oh, we have a quorum, great. So could I have a mover for the agenda? Thank you, Ryan and Nicole. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. So I'll go to the minutes. Do we have any, first of all, could I have a mover for the minutes? Ryan, thank you. Elaine, thank you. Do we have any questions about the minutes? Yes, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just an amendment under A4, which is on page
I'm not
4.
hearing you.
I can hear her.
Are you able to hear us at the moment? Have you?
Can you hear me now?
Is there a reason why I'm not hearing?
Let me jump on the chat with you.
Hang on.
I think it's your volume. If you can hear us coming through now.
Okay, thank you,
okay?
Nicole. Carry on.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. No, it's just an amendment.
I'm still not hearing you, Nicole.
Let me see if I can turn up my end. I don't know if it shouldn't affect your end, but.
No, I hear Nicole perfectly.
Same. Chair, are you able to turn your volume up any more? Sorry,
Yeah.
I'll sit a little
No,
closer
I'm
and
not
try
hearing
to speak
Nicole.
loud.
Andy, what's my problem?
Just jump on the chat, even though you can't hear me. So one moment.
Okay. I think I can hear now. Nicole,
Okay.
I'll ask you to repeat whatever it is you said.
Hi, Tom. No, it's just an amendment at A4 of the agenda, which is
Okay.
on page 4 of the pack-up.
Okay.
So the amendment would read, so this is at the first sentence under A4, business arising from the minutes. It would read, further to C2 of the March 2022 Ed Policy Agenda, Trustee Duncan requested an update on whether staff had clarified if the Fortis materials were being used at any middle school or high school.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Do I have any other questions about the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Oh, pardon me, Chair, sorry. There was just a slight revision to the second paragraph too.
Oh, okay.
So same A4 again, would read, interim superintendent Witten had no update and agreed to follow up with district principal Hovis regarding middle schools and high schools. And that's it.
Great, thank you. So could I have an approval? Could I call the question? All those in favor of the minutes as they are amended? Thank you. And I see, is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we'll go straight to welcome Angelo Carmichael.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. My name is Angelo Carmichael, and I am an uninvited settler on the traditional and rightful lands of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. I'm here tonight to speak to you all, and not as VCPAC president, nor as even George J. PAC representative. I'm here as a parent because I have had a student in SD61 and more importantly in George J for the last 9 years. Wow, it's been 9 years. And so I've been advocating at a school and district level for George J for 9 years. And we have seen a drastic reduction in ground level services for the families of George J. Now, in the latest survey of poverty in this city was done in 2019 before the pandemic, and there was 8,510 children living in poverty. And I can only imagine that that number is larger after the pandemic. We all had a hard 2 years, and nobody felt that more so than our most vulnerable students. And so when we are losing staff members at youth and family counselors or just human beings in the building who have a very serious connection to those families. It's detrimental not just to the most vulnerable, but to every student in the school. So as you may or may not know, a position was unfortunately cut. And that's mostly because what our administrations are given to work with isn't enough to cover what needs to be done, especially in schools like George J. So we need to no longer, I don't want to come here and complain and fight and be angry. I want to come to you and tell you that this is a very dire situation where we are making administrations choose which services are best needed in the school because they're all needed. A lot of that number, that 8,510 students or children, a vast majority of them would be going to George J. And so with a unique set of problems, issues, we should say, because we have students who have fled war to come to our school. We have students who suffer from active abuse. We have students who have intergenerational trauma. We have students who are rights holders, and that means LGBTQ2+ human beings are rights holders. The First Nations are right holders. A disabled student is a rights holder. And so these are the students that are immediately they're the ones that are losing out every time. Every time that there isn't enough in the budget, every time that an administration has to make a cut, what we're essentially telling these students is, you're not worth it. And I want you all to know we have to start lobbying the provincial government as a group. And I'm asking you to do that. You have to stand up for the families and the students of this district. And we need to do it now. If we are unable to fund positions that are so desperately needed in our schools, we need to step up to the provincial government and ask them to fix the issues in this education system. And we can only do that with more funding for mental health. I want you all to know that the students at George J need the position that was cut. It's not a want. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity for day-to-day living. And so when we know that we have X amount of dollars for a budget, we really need to maybe plan for 4 years, because in the last 4 years, I have seen services be cut directly within the school, and then a pandemic. So we have students and families who are struggling on the daily, and it's happening today, tonight, right now, as I speak to you here. So I guess I'm asking you to start lobbying the provincial government. If they have to raise the BST 1% and put it to education and mental health services, so be it. But we cannot continue on the path that we are on, because we are not giving an educational experience that is going to be a foundation for happy, healthy adults. It starts very young, and we need to reach the most vulnerable students now. There is no later for them. And so I'm asking you, find a way, any way, to reinstate any positions cut in the community link funding, because it's imperative for survival for some people. And I do thank you for your time.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Angela. I appreciate your speaking up for mental health services in your school. Very important. Thank you. Our next presentation is the Capstone Project, and I think District Principal Halverson is presenting. Am I correct?
Yes, good evening. I'm not sure if, I'm just going to jump right in. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and just to be able to give a little bit of intro to our great grade 12 student here, Isabella, who's going to speak in a few minutes, but I wanted to just set a little bit of the context for you. So in your package, you have, hopefully you've seen it, there's the admin regulation, there's an admin regulation with quite a few strikeouts through it, and then there's a new draft admin regulation. And we have, one of the things I just wanted to, we moved from a substance abuse admin regulation to what we hope is a substance use admin regulation. This really does tie into the work that we are doing across the district in the area of harm harm reduction and really looking at things through that lens of education. And so just wanted you to know that while we are here today, we are really here today to celebrate Isabella, because this is part of her capstone project. And we thought it was important to let her have this time with you before the end of the school year, which is quickly approaching. And we will be coming back, and this admin regulation will go through the normal process through ops that all of them do. And further to that, myself and my colleague Jennifer Chambers will be here in June to present a little bit more on harm reduction and what we're doing in that area to give you a more fulsome presentation. So about Isabella. Isabella reached out to the district in, Isabella, I think it was the fall, and started to say, what are we doing around this substance abuse regulation that we have? And Isabella has done some research and has done some big thinking that she shared with us as a team. And that really spurred us on because her thinking dovetailed with where we were going as a district. And so it was a lovely opportunity to celebrate and to bring student voice into the conversation. And it was a pleasure to work with Isabella. I then had the pleasure of working with a number of principals from secondary schools to say, here's what we're hearing from students. Here's what we currently have. We can do better. We need to do better. And so that's where we are right now. But I'm going to turn it over to Isabella to share and just say welcome.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the introduction. I really appreciate it. So I know I really appreciate you guys' time, and I know it is a busy time of year for everyone, and these meetings can run kind of long. So I'm going to keep it pretty short and sweet, but I'm just going to go over sort of why I started this, and then what my process was, and then a bit of a reflection on what I would do differently, and sort of some suggestions, I guess, to other students if they'd like to take something like this up as a project. So yeah, so I started this in grade 11, so last year in about June, and I didn't know where to start. I sort of saw this policy or this regulation, and I thought, that needs changing. That isn't what I want it to look like, right? And it isn't benefiting our school community, right? So I saw that, and then I applied to be student representative for my school, which was sort of the first step, and then the year ended, summer happened, and then I picked it back up in September. And so one of the main reasons why I sort of was doing this was I had a friend who was really struggling with substance use and struggling with addiction, and there was no access to support for them, seemingly. It didn't seem like it was a system that was built to support people. It seemed like a system that was built to punish people. So I don't think that really reflected what the current approach to harm reduction is, and what the current approach for the district should be to harm reduction. And then the current or the previous iteration of the policy and what is being changed as of right now used really stigmatizing language, and it framed addiction as a choice rather than an illness, which I think is something we are really trying to move away from, is that addiction is not a choice, and it is not a behavior people would like to participate in, but it is an illness and should be treated as such. So I didn't think that reflected the current mindset on substance use. So I sort of saw something that needed to be changed, and then, changed it, I guess. But and then another thing that really stuck out to me was that it hadn't been updated since 2002. And that's before I was born. So that seems like quite a long time ago, right? So in the midst of this overdose epidemic, which we have in BC, when, thousands of people are dying, and thousands of people have died since 2016, when it was declared an epidemic, there was little to no response from the province or from the district. And there was no help for these people, really. And I think that's really a part of how drug addiction is stigmatized, and that is really a reflection of how it is still stigmatized in our province and in our communities. And the reason that it probably hadn't been updated since 2002 is because it's not something people really wanted to talk about. And I don't think that is a good place to start. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my process now. So it started, in grade 11, as I said, so last year in June, about a year ago, I talked with my principal and I became our student representative, which was really great. And then September of this school year, I talked with a school counselor, Ms. Hoffman, who is now our vice principal, and she directed me to Ms. Halverson and Deb Witten, who really helped me through this process. thank goodness for them, because I would not have been able to do it without them. So they were super helpful. And then I also talked with my school's principal, Miss Pyrrhic, and we sort of did a lot of reflecting on the problems we see in our school and the problems I see within my peers and within substance use. And that was really helpful. And then also, what is in the realm of possibilities for me to change, and what am I able to actually do, right, as student representative and as someone who sees a problem in our district. And so I went over the regulation with Miss Halverson, and she sort of asked me first, what do you want to change? Which was a big question, because I hadn't really thought of it in that way before. I sort of had a vague idea of, I want it to reflect, a harm reduction approach, but then what does that actually realistically look like in a regulation was a really big question. So I talked it over with the other student representatives and with my peers and with my mom. And I sort of realized that I didn't really want to keep any of the old regulation, and that pretty much all of it was in sort of a format that really stigmatized drug use and that didn't reflect a current approach to substance use and harm reduction, as I said before. So where was I? Sorry, I have points and I'm just going over them. Okay, so the previous iteration of the policy was sort of a negative reinforcement model, and it detailed a behavior and then a punishment. And I don't think that is an effective way to deal with addiction in any situation, really. Like, if we look at countries like Portugal that have decriminalized drug use, right, they've seen a significant decrease in people who are addicted to drugs, and an increase in people who are able to be rehabilitated and who are able to live more normal and more healthy lives because of this decriminalization. And a lot of that has to do with the stigma around drug use, right? So I think changing this policy to focus more on destigmatizing and offering support rather than punishment was a really big part of what I wanted to see changed. Okay, and then if you look at the policy, if you look at the new iteration of the policy, under point 5 in procedure, it says students should feel free to seek and receive counseling about substance use and related problems without fear of punishment or reprisal. And I think seeing that in the new policy really felt like success, because that was the main point that I was trying to get across, is that substance use is not something that should be treated in a way that is blaming, I guess, is that blaming the individual for this illness that they have, right? Because something like the common cold, we wouldn't blame someone for being sick, but with drug addiction, that is often the narrative, is that it's their fault. And I don't think that's a way that helps people with addiction in any way. So that seeing that part of the procedure was really amazing, and seeing that was there was really great for me. And I think that is the whole message that I was sort of trying to convey with this new regulation. So yeah, I think that was mostly my process. And then now I'm here and I'm talking to all of you, and I really appreciate your time. And so this is an exciting moment. And then just a bit of reflection here to close up. So I think if I had to do some things differently, I probably would have started earlier, as this turns out to be a very long process, which I didn't think it would be. I thought it would just be, it's a website, you can go on a website and change anything, but turns out there's a very long process that I was not aware of, but definitely still happy with what I did. And I think another big thing was not being afraid to put my opinion out there. I think initially I thought I would receive a lot of pushback, and I thought I would receive a lot of negative feedback that was like, we don't really care about changing this regulation. But I was met with overwhelming support from pretty much everyone that I talked to, which was really amazing and motivating, and super great to have people who were there to sort of support me and show me what could actually be done in this process. So I think that was really great. And I think the first step, the scariest step, was definitely like putting this idea out there and putting my opinion out there and saying, this is, what I think, and this is what needs to be changed, because it is not helping my peers, and it is not helping me, and it is not helping the student body. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I would really like to thank you all again for your time. I really appreciate you listening to me. And if you have any questions or comments, or hopefully not concerns, but if you do, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Isabella.
Thank you.
So, Anne?
Thank you, and thank you for this, Isabella. And I really liked your comments. I think they ring very, very true that good policy and regulations take time. I think that's something that this board is also aware of, that, and I'm glad that you took the time, right? And what you learned from where you started and where you ended up. And I think that you said that it was the time and the reflection. And, you know, the more time we take when we look at that and the more time we take to reflect, the more fulsome, the more situations we're able to think through and put down on paper, because you want those things down before the situation, not once it happens. So thank you very much for what you did and for taking that time. It's great. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Whitaker. I've got Trustee Painter.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to take a moment to really recognize and acknowledge the work that you did, Isabella, not approaching this from a very systematic perspective, but also appreciating that when it became difficult, you reached out for support and you continued pushing forward. You didn't shy away from the challenge of going through policy and regulation. I have to tell you, when I was in high school, I wasn't looking at policies and regulations of my school district. So it's super impressive. And I'll also say, when I started scrolling through the regulation and I saw all the strikeouts, I thought, oh my goodness, we are going for some big changes. And I think it's really exciting. You've approached this from a really evolved perspective in how we look at harm reduction. And as somebody who has had two close and personal family members who have dealt with substance use disorder that started in high school, this touches me quite personally. And so I really appreciate the work that you've done here. I think it's important, and I think it's going to affect the way that we approach this issue going forward. So really well done. It's super impressive, and I can't wait to see this move forward. Thanks for your work on this.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. And we have Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you very much, Isabella. I just wanted to say how impressed I was, not just to hear you tonight. You're a very well-spoken young person, but the leadership and really the bravery to step forward and say, you know what, we can do better. We need to do better. We should do better. And what does that look like? You know, that's not an easy thing to do for anyone, to do it as a young person, still in school and still in education, where there does tend to be still that command and control model that we're trying to move away from. But I think that, you know, this policy is a good example of, you know, it reflects a culture of command and control in education that we know we need to move away from. And you're helping us, I think, to put us on a path in this context to move away from that and to really focus on supports, you know, what students need when they're dealing with a serious health issue like substance use and issues with that. So thank you so much for your leadership. I'm really looking forward to when this comes back to our tables and we can continue to work on it. And I hope that some of your student colleagues, maybe in a slightly younger grade, will be there to continue your good work. But thanks so much for being here tonight and for your very wise words.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan, and I'll turn it back to District Principal Halverson.
Just thank you, everyone, and especially thank you to Isabella. I know Isabella is headed off to SFU in the fall, and we wish her nothing but the best. And I know she's got some big dreams. And Isabella, again, thank you. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and to work with you on this. And thank you for bringing this to our attention and working with us as we make it better for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you both. That's very inspiring for all of us. We'll now go to District Principal Short, I believe. Or am I correct in that? To the early years update?
It is me, Trustee Ferris.
Oh, okay. So thank you, David.
Yeah, I'll just start off by saying thanks for having us here tonight. And we've got District Vice Principal Charmaine Short and Facilities Associate Director Marnie Vistison Harwood, who are going to be speaking tonight and updating around childcare and also around the early years. So I will now turn it over to Charmaine Short.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Trustee Ferris. Just going to share my screen. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that. Beautiful. It's always a pleasure to share about the little ones in our district. And I did want to also speak to Isabella and say thank you so much. What an inspiring young lady. And I would love to have spoken to her more about her early years experiences, because she's definitely had a wonderful foundation. So thank you for bringing that tonight, Isabella. Yes, to bring us all down into the early years. First, I just want to invite you to pause and take a good look at the photo that we have here. I think we have all these adult things on our mind, and we need to come into context. So take a look. I just want to consider for a moment how a moment like this might transpire and all that's happening in this photo. I see here an evolving identity, a little bit scientist, a little bit glamour and fancy, and a little bit construction worker or engineer, artist. This child is really learning about who they are. And for this child to feel safe and comfortable and engaged in this way, a caring and resourceful educator has established an environment where the child feels empowered and comfortable to be themselves and explore areas of curiosity and interest. I think if you look closely, this child is immersed in deep thinking, creative thinking, probably some reasoning. And I know this moment started with an act of caring. The chair was broken and they wanted to fix it for their friend. I think so many of the things going on here, adults often overlook. And this child is really learning through play. And we know that play is the pathway to relevant and meaningful learning. And so the social emotional grounding that's taking place just in this little moment and all the moments throughout the school day, really it's immeasurable. And the educator has invited this engagement. So just amazing to think all that goes into this little tiny moment. The educators offered varied play materials and created the space and the time for the child to interact in creative and joyful ways. So I just think this picture is really a beautiful demonstration of a rich and inclusive opportunity that we hope for all of our youngest learners. And so tonight we're going to check in. How are we doing and who are we missing? To check up on our system, we often ask ourselves, what is going on for our learners, their families, and our school-based staff. And some data points that we use to inform our planning include the check and the EDI from the Human Early Learning Partnership out of UBC, as well as our Strong Start registration and attendance, and conversations and learning that we gain from our community partners and our colleagues and our greater community. And I'll speak to more deeply about those. So again, I've placed a picture here of a typical class of little friends, and I would delight in telling you each of their names and all about them. All of these little friends I had the good fortune of teaching. But so as I share some of the data points that we've gathered from the instruments that I spoke of, I just really want you to consider how this data might show up in the experiences of our earliest learners. For example, from the check questionnaire that went out to families prior to their children starting school, more than half of the respondents noted that they experienced consistent high to very high levels of stress over the past year and through the pandemic. And so you have to ask, how how might that show up in our classrooms? And how can we respond to that heightened stress? We learned that 78% of families rely on full-time childcare prior to their children starting school. So how can we best support our families? We learned that 64% of respondents felt disconnected to family and friends during the pandemic. I think we all did. And this indicates that more than half of the children here, or all the children coming into our kindergarten classrooms, have had reduced or no experience with children outside of their family. And that is a very significant data point. So this data has really deeply informed our planning, and specifically highlighting the critical need to focus on connection or reconnection in some cases. And really, our communities have experienced just such a disruption during the pandemic. So it's so important that we respond by prioritizing relationships and compassionate connections. Taking all of our data into consideration, we know that more than ever, I mean, I think we've always known this, and now it's critical that we make sure we focus on our environments and learning in the early years, being grounded in relationships. And so among everything we did this year, we prioritized building connection and belonging for our children and their families. And to do that, we knew we needed to continue to strengthen the welcoming process. We needed to strengthen our community partnerships. We needed to support our educators who are continually on a quest for ways to embed social emotional learning experiences in their classrooms for their children. We collaborated with other districts to determine ways we can support each other in sharing and sharing resources and professional learning opportunities. That was actually a beautiful byproduct of the virtual world of COVID, and recognizing again the significant need for childcare. I think we're working diligently to increase inclusive childcare spaces and access to all across our district, and I look forward to Marnie telling us more about that. So as I said, we focused on connection and belonging, and we know that emotions have substantial influence on cognitive process for all humans, and specifically around the areas of attention and learning and memory and reasoning. And yes, we need those in our classrooms. So to improve student academic outcomes, we have to foster a solid foundation of social emotional competence. And we know that when a child feels seen and heard and valued at school, their confidence towards learning and trying new things is bolstered, and their achievement levels are positively impacted. So all of our professional learning sessions have provided educators with opportunities to learn more about building belonging and nurturing social emotional wellness for all children. And what that might look like, even as simple as starting each day, greeting each child by name and recognizing them as they come into the classroom. We hosted our first ever district-wide virtual professional learning day, and we had over 800 participants. So huge kudos to the educators in our district who constantly show up to better their practice. In the early years, the professional learning focused on building belonging through literacy. We spoke a little bit about that in our literacy update, and specifically story making and storytelling. And story making is a research-aligned method really of empowering identity and building oral language skills. And it's just a universal point of entry for all. So it's a very inclusive practice. And this strategy involves using small materials called loose parts. You might remember from our last presentation. And children use the materials to create or retell stories. The story making process really encourages imagination and deep thinking and talk. And it's a natural vehicle for emergent writing. So Also, I thought I just wanted to add that although the data is really just only emerging about how mask wearing has impacted our speech and language development, we know that learning the pronunciation of letters and sounds is much more challenging while wearing a mask. So to get ahead of that, to try and get ahead of that and to really improve equity of access for oral language opportunities, we're creating loose parts kits to house in our schools so that story making resources are available for educators and story making experiences then are available for our students. Another area we placed a focus on connection and belonging was for the caregivers and families coming into our system. We know that when we make a positive connection with families, we begin to nurture that partnership, that invaluable partnership that really will lead us through the educational journey. And so we've prioritized our time to build and broaden our connections to the families and caregivers who are coming in to our system. And I think, how did we do that? We really took a hard look at our welcoming communication and process and we provide to families. Have we made the welcome process as culturally responsive and inclusive as possible? And among all the pieces to this, I think one positive addition to the process that's really worth noting is the personal reach outs to families from the school where their child will be attending. And the support of our colleagues in making phone calls to incoming families has been incredible. Huge shout out to our colleagues for that. And a personal connection, we just know it's so integral to hopefully building that long-term reciprocal partnership. And so it was just that one really tugs at my heart. We've created common templates of information for families. And schools can then personalize them and send them out to families. So just another way that we can improve equity of access for all. Oh, this was such a fun night. We hosted our first ever virtual parent welcome evening. And we were really trying to think of our families. How could we make it as convenient as possible? And so we scheduled it after bedtime, hoping that parents could just enjoy some time with us and learn a little bit more about the district in kindergarten. We were so overwhelmed by the wonderful turnout of close to 600 families. And we recorded the session, and we've since had close to 400 families view this recording. So a huge testament to the dedication and interest of our parent and families coming into the system. Yeah, that was a very meaningful increase in participation for a district welcome evening. So we realized that by making the evening virtual, it was obviously accessible to a wider population. So throughout that presentation, we invited feedback or questions from parents and caregivers. And again, just another opportunity really to invite that personal home and school connection. The picture here is a welcome to kindergarten bag and some of the contents inside the bag. So all children joining our learning community in September of 2022 will receive the same package of resources to support their growth and learning. And these packages will be gifted to the children when they attend their Welcome to Kindergarten event, which is held May or June at the school, at their new school. So exciting, just, oh my goodness, I couldn't even begin to describe. We ensured that the resources are culturally responsive, really again, so children and families can see themselves in the materials. As we speak about equitable access, I really wanted to recognize two of our community partners, and the Intercultural Association, the Victoria Native Friendship Center. Like, we continue to build relationships with these partners, and I just have such a wonderful time connecting and listening and learning with them. Their voice really has offered so much insight and generated improvements in our early years welcome. With the influx of refugees and newcomer families coming in, finding their way to Victoria, we're really working closely with the ICA in strengthening that welcome process and making it more accessible in language and so on. As well, we've created virtual resources to support educators. Just that awareness and understanding of the backgrounds and needs of children and families with refugee experience. As well, the generative conversations and learning gleaned from our partnership with the Victoria Native Friendship Centre has really been integral in informing and inspiring the creation of our holistic welcoming practice that we do in our welcoming conversations. So the template that's pictured here, it acts as a guide as teachers and parents sit together for their welcoming conversation in September. And it's an opportunity to learn about the whole child and a way for every educator to learn about the strengths and the joys and the potential of their new students. I can't say enough about the partnerships, and I really wanted to have a shout out for them. Another very important connection for children and families prior to starting school is Strong Start. And we have 6 incredible Strong Start centers in our district. And at Strong Start, qualified and really truly amazing early childhood educators lead play-based learning activities and offer children opportunities just to interact and make friends, as well as their families. So after all the data I spoke about earlier, Strong Start is really a wonderful response. Strong Start is helpful for us because we can determine sort of the attendance and the registration that goes along with that, and hopefully that can guide how we can best optimize that offering for as many families as possible. Just pictures of some of the experiences they create for their children and families, just nonstop creativity going on there. And one way we're inviting families into our Strong Start is by hosting the district-wide Ready, Set, Learn in the 6 centers. So Ready, Set, Learn, as you may remember, is a ministry-funded initiative, and it's intended to provide learning and play opportunities for children ages 3 to 5, so prior to coming to school. Ready, Set, Learn has been on hiatus for the last couple of years, so we're just so thrilled to be bringing it back. And we're very pleased to be housing it in our Strong Start centers. The early childhood educators are planning and facilitating the event. So we're thrilled to be drawing on their strengths. And we really do have such a brilliant team of early childhood educators. Speaking of whom, we have 10 early childhood educators who work alongside primary teachers, and they're housed in 9 schools, which were determined by data brought to us in light from the EDI findings. And 6 of these ECEs facilitate a Strong Start in the morning, and then they're so fortunate they get to join a kindergarten class for the afternoon. So this initiative is really a huge added layer of social emotional wraparound for students who need it most. And early childhood educators in early years classrooms is one profound way to make a difference and really better life chances for our earliest learners. So we really very much hope to grow this initiative in the district. And as you may have heard at the beginning of the presentation, 78% of families rely on childcare prior to starting school. I'd like to now turn it over to Marnie to share the amazing work taking place to respond to the ever-increasing need for affordable care. So Marnie, I hope you're with us. Thank you so much, and let me know when to move the slides along.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the community childcare spaces within the school district and the ones that we're trying to create within the school district as well. So you can see the little table there. And to date, the Ministry of Children and Family Development has actually given us funding to create 1,035 new spaces. So of these to date, we've created just a little over 300 of them. And you'll notice the grandfathered spaces. These are spaces that if we've received funding at a site, we have to grandfather all the current spaces on. So for example, in Doncaster, they had about 70 spaces within the school for before and after school care. And then we received funding for that site to put 2 studios on the property. And we had to grandfather those spaces inside the school for 15 years. And we created the new ones outside the school as well. So they got more spaces within the school district. Next slide, please. So right now we are busy building. So we have received funding for these spaces and they're built to date. There's a number of them. The Braefoot George J is not, it's ready. We're just waiting for occupancy from this municipalities. And then the kids will be in there in September. Tillicum, we have 1 studio to open. We're just, they're trying to get an ECE and that will be open for September. So all these should be open for September, which will be great. And that's roughly about 450 spaces, which will be open for September on those different sites. And the picture is just a picture of one of our studios inside. Next slide, please. So we have a number of sites that are in progress. So Marigold, if anyone's been around there, you'll see the build going on. That will be open in this September. View Royal and Eagle View, they'll be open in the following September. And we're expecting building permits for the Lake Hill, Mackenzie, and Hillcrest. So those will be coming soon. The plan is to do the site prep over the summer months and then start building and to be open for the following September. And then there's a number of sites that we're just working on drawings and community consultations. And we were recently funded for another 3 sites. So Squamont, Glanford, and Uplands is the next couple sites that we've been funding for. And we keep applying each time the ministry opens their funding for us. And the picture there is of George J. That's the exterior of the George J. Childcare Studios. Next slide, please. Lastly, the childcare, really, it's the first point of connection for families and children before they enter kindergarten. We have amazing third-party providers that support our programs. It supports the childcare policy, and it also supports the MCFD requirements. So all of these providers already have programs to support vulnerable families and children. They have programs to support single parents, young parents, low-income families, families that are new to Canada. They have programs to support Indigenous children and their families, as well as accessible programs for all children of all abilities. They really are the building block to connect students to the school, to the school community. I believe that's the end of my slides. And I should say before I wrap up that our current license agreement is open to families first for their school site. And if those spaces are not filled, it's open to the community after that. And I believe it's back to Charmaine.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marnie. Incredible work going on there. And I have a lot of connection with the districts across the province, and space is such a concern for childcare. So we really are so fortunate to have these spaces on our sites, and thank you to Marnie for that. Yes, I think as we look ahead as a team, we really recognize that families entering our system are facing significant hurdles. So compassion and caring, access, and equity will really remain at the core of our work. And that involves establishing relationships, and just listening and learning from one another. And through that connection and belonging, and really thinking back to that first slide, creating joyful learning environments for all of our earliest learners. I know every investment we place into the early years is a proactive, it's proactive, and it will garner long-term gain. It just, you can't argue it. Oh, this is going to be great. So when you woke up this morning, you probably didn't know that you were having the opportunity to attend a world premiere today. Today is your lucky day. We have a video for you this evening we'd like to leave you with, and it's debuting some of our George J. Elementary students. They share their voices about their experience as a kindergarten. The intention of this video really, again, was another way to welcome all new families, and knowing that stress levels are high, who better to tell us it can be okay is the children themselves. So I do hope it works for us, and we welcome your questions and feedback after the video.
Do you have any tips for starting kindergarten? You should always be brave. We are going to go to kindergarten and make friends and learn new things and share with the whole world. You should be social and nice to everyone. Try your best and never be afraid to ask questions. Be kind to others. Be yourself so people can see who you really are. What is your favorite kindergarten memory? In kindergarten, I met Isabel and we're still friends. I met my best friend Francesca and we're still friends today. I liked playing on the swings. Felt like you were flying. Being in the class and making new friends. One more, recess. How do I make friends in kindergarten? Start off small, not big. Ask people if they want to play, and you should try and include someone. Say hi to everyone. You'll be friends with them. Smile at people. How do you deal with big feelings? Yeah, they shouldn't be that scared. They should be happy about it. Sometimes I talk to the teacher, and then I didn't feel scared or nervous anymore. Trusted guardian is always there for you, and they can help you in any way you need. If you miss your mom and dad, just have fun. Having fun is part of life. What do families need to know? The more you worry, the worse it gets. Everything will be fine. All the parents and EAs and teachers there really care about them. Pack an extra snack. Make sure you're on time for pickup, especially when it's raining. What surprised you about kindergarten? You can kind of get to know the teachers and know what they do, and everybody in the school is really friendly. The older kids help take care of the younger kids. You can ask someone for help. Kindergarten's really just about the basics of stuff you're going to learn in school. Is there anything else I should know about kindergarten? Be yourself, not who everyone else wants you to be. And do what your heart says. Be brave, be friendly. I think kindergarten is all about making new friends and growing up. To know that it's not scary and it's actually probably much more funner than they think it is. Just remember, it's kindergarten. Everything's gonna be all right. Kindergarten is like the best place to go.
Thank you, everyone. I invite any questions.
Sure. Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much. Anytime I hear us building connections with parents and really focused on that belonging, it just really, really warms my heart. And I have loved hearing your passion and excitement for working with these students and on these projects. That yeah, I just really need to thank you for that. And I also really wanted to thank you for how it seems that you've really heard and listened to the barriers that parents have to accessing school. It's not that parents don't want to, but you know, when there's little ones, it's really, there's different challenges that we have to remember. And it really sounds like you've done a great deal of work to remove those barriers and come up with creative solutions. And I'm positive as the years continue, we will see that effort and that accomplishment as parents move through the system with their students. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Trustee Whitaker. Yeah, it's a work in progress. This kind of system change takes a lot of time, as you know, so we will move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Charmaine. That was a great presentation. I loved the film. That was really great. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much. I know this is the second time in the last little while that you've taken some time out of your evening to share with us what you and the team are working on. And it's exciting. It's really lovely to hear about all the good work. I really love the question of how do we respond that you're grounding your work in, that thoughtfulness of how do we respond to those challenges that folks are having. And it's something, it's so interesting to see that, you know, despite all the challenges of the pandemic, that, you know, we've learned that something as simple as a virtual meeting, which we're now all quite familiar with, can increase that accessibility for families and can garner that sense of belonging because it's opening up and making it more accessible to folks. So yeah, really, really lovely to hear. And oh my
Sorry, Nicole, I think you muted. Okay.
Such a privilege to have been the first to watch that video. How lovely. And great advice. We should ask our students more often because boy, they really know where things are at and how to guide their peers. So thank you very much, Charmaine.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan. And seeing no more speakers, I will move us to the Policy Committee. And is Trustee Leonard here? Yes, she is. Trustee Leonard, did you wish to talk about the Policy 4304?
Well, it was referred to this committee through the ops meeting, and I'll turn it to the Secretary Treasurer because she very kindly and with great detail gave us all of the revisions that we talked about at the last meeting. So I'll turn it over to Secretary Treasurer Morris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. So I think starting on page 48 of your packet, you'll see a revised version 2 of the policy 4304 bullying and harassment. I took into account some of the notes I took last time and hoping I captured them all. The first one being some definitions around good faith, as well as complaint, as suggested by someone attending the committee meeting. And then moving down to the policy itself, we continue to see all employees and trustees share in the responsibility in 3.2, and 3.3 is not changed from the previous version. We do have a draft social media policy ready to come to the ops committee. So we'll be able to round that one out fairly soon. We talked a little bit about responsibilities and I took some notes around that. 4.1 adds through the superintendent and then some other responsibilities for people in our learning community, including students, employees, and trustees. And then we had quite a bit of discussion around references. And so we know there will be a regulation 4304 and some revisions to that. Trustee Code of Conduct is currently under review and being drafted. Policy new to speak to trustee sanctions is also to be developed. And at the last ops meeting, we asked, or it was asked under the I think trustee code of conduct that a suite of policies come, and so sanctions, role of trustee, role of board, et cetera, will be part of that suite that comes to ops. Human rights code, as well as the Workers' Compensation Act. And I hope that I've captured most of the notes, but I leave it here for the committee to discuss.
Thank you. So trustee Leonard.
Thank you. I'd just like to put the motion on the floor, please.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Thank you, trustee Hens. And speakers to the motion. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I want to say, I guess, first off, thank you for including some definitions around good faith. I think there's still some work that we need to do around the responsibilities section and some clarifying work regarding who the policy applies to and really what that means in practice. I continue to be concerned that the policy I don't think is sufficiently clear when it comes to you know, really providing a safe environment for governors, board governors, for trustees. I think along with responsibility also comes, I think, the right for anybody in a governance environment and in a board environment like ours to a safe working environment free from bullying and harassment. So I'd like to see some of that clarified. And I think at this stage, it might be prudent to send it out. So I know that many of our stakeholders are not around our tables at the moment. So, you know, one of the options would be for us to send the draft and by email, maybe with a letter or an email inviting our stakeholders who aren't around the table to comment on the drafts. Barring that, I think that we really, these kinds of changes, we would really need to table if we're not going to be proactive and seek their input through the means that's available to us. Then I think we really should be tabling this until everyone is back at the table. So that's my input for tonight, but thanks so much for the work to give us this revised draft. I appreciate it.
Thank you, trustee Duncan. Further speakers? Trustee Whitaker.
Chair, sorry, Chair, I do have my hand up.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
sorry about that.
Thanks. I was just going to say I'm happy to let Ryan go first. I saw his hand up before mine.
Oh, great. Trustee Painter.
Thanks, and sorry everybody, I'm having some connection issues, so you won't have to see me, but you can hear me. I want to acknowledge the work that's been done to add these updates in. I do see a good deal of what we discussed at the last meeting reflected in the updates that have been made here, and I certainly appreciate, as Trustee Duncan has said, around the good faith additions. I think those are particularly important and relevant here, and I appreciate the updated language, certainly into the policy and responsibility section. I think for my knowledge and information, especially in reference to the references, I guess that makes sense. In looking at the references that we have here, I mean, it's very clear to me what's being put on the table and what we're being asked to consider and support. I mean, in terms of responsibilities, to me, it's very clear that under 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4, there are direct legislative and regulatory pieces that we're being directed towards in terms of reviewing our necessary compliance measures. And if we go to 4.2, the individual school codes of conduct, 4.3, employees being obliged to be in compliance with the Workers' Compensation Act, and then trustees being responsible to ensure compliance under 8251, the Code of Conduct, which is under review and getting a further revision. So to me, I think it's quite clear what our responsibilities are in terms of act and regulation. And I think our policies make it quite clear. In fact, I was reflecting on this and being reminded, especially around the social media use, of my time in government. And when we swear an oath, when we work in government, and the social media policies that are in place there are in some ways, you could say, more restrictive than what's here. There are thresholds that you are not allowed to cross if you work in government. And I would say, I think we've struck a good balance. I'm not saying we haven't. I actually think the balance here is quite good. I am pointing out, though, that I do think there are situations that arise in other government bodies, which I think have gone even further than what we've done here, which I don't necessarily 100% agree with. But my point is, I think what's here is good, and I have no challenge supporting what's been put before us. Thank you.
Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you. And thank you for these revisions. I just want to, and maybe taking our student Isabella's need for time into consideration, and about how, sometimes you think about situations and it's that time that you take to think it through. But I guess, and I really, I like where we've gotten to a certain place under 2.4, the complaint, but at the same time, I worry about other situations, like the reading of statement that a situation is unsatisfactory or unacceptable. To me, that could be just about anything under the sun. And so for me, I think that's just a little bit loose in that statement. Yeah, there should be something very broad, but I don't know. To me, an informal allegation against a party or an individual, any issue raised regarding the conduct of an employee or a trustee. I guess for me, it's as well, does it have to be the victim that's raising it? Can it be, so if another individual raised that they saw something against another one, and neither of those two parties made a complaint, is that a complaint? I mean, in some situations, I think that is a complaint. And I think that's the bystander duty, that if somebody else sees something, that they are obligated to act and to do something. So I guess I'm just concerned that how a complaint and the bystander piece that I think needs to be included in this, in any bullying and harassment policy, that bystander piece should be in there somewhere, that it's not just the person who is feeling bullied or harassed, but anybody that witnesses it should, in my mind, be within the policy, that any bystander as well has an obligation. And this particular policy, where I appreciate it says these are our responsibilities, it does not, I guess that's my bottom line, is I don't see the bystander in here at all. And that's what makes bullying and harassment continue or become acceptable, is because bystanders aren't saying or doing something. So I would like to see that there is something that is included in here on that piece, that a bystander is also obligated to report anything that they see. I don't know what people think about that, but that's just what I think is missing.
Thank you. I'll go to Secretary Treasurer Morris.
I wonder if 3.2 helps at all.
No,
where it says whether they were the target or they were witness to the bullying or harassment.
Elaine?
In my mind, that covers a bystander.
I just think that there needs to be a piece, some line, like I get what you're saying, but I just feel like there should be something about that in the complaint, like just under section 2. Does that, I get that we all have these because this is policy, but the complaint itself, like if a bystander, if somebody sees it, somewhere in there, it should say anybody seeing this needs to complain. Very straight and clear, not, oh, we all have this responsibility or a choice. It's that, no, if anybody sees something, they have an obligation to say something. That's what we expect of our students. And I think we need to model it as adults.
Trustee Leonard?
In my mind, it is covered in 3.2. So yes, you could write it in again, but I think Trustee Whitaker's point has been covered from my perspective in 3.2.
Chair, if I may.
Trustee Painter?
Yeah, I really do appreciate what Trustee Whitaker is trying to say. Just from my perspective, I think laying out in 3.2 that employees are responsible. I think that is putting an onus on the individual who witnesses, who is there, who sees it. To me, and then, again, this is just me, I think those three pieces right there, they put that onus very clear, very direct, very specifically on that person. Thanks.
All right, do we have further speakers to the motion? I'll call the question.
Oh, I do have one, sorry, I do have one more.
Yes, please.
Me?
Yes,
yeah, I just wanted to slide down to the bottom under references and where it says 5.3, a policy on trustee sanctions. I would just seek some clarification. I don't remember the board ever giving any instruction to create such a policy, which sounds very punitive, by the way. So where did that come from?
Secretary Treasurer Morris.
I'm not sure the origin. I know when I arrived in October 2019, when Trustee Painter and McNally were on the committee, this was some work they had brought forward at that time. So the board during 2019, or the policy committee at that time, was reviewing, I think, code of conduct sanctions, as well as perhaps some of the role policies. So that's where it became known to me that the board or the policy committee wanted to work on this particular subject. So that's been
well, so I'm just going to make the suggestion. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, finish.
No, let's go ahead.
Yeah, just because that sounds like that's something that the policy committee has struck, but it has not come before the board. My suggestion is let's strike 5.3, regardless if the policy committee wants to do that and then come to the board and ask us if we want to do that committee or that policy, that's great. But my fear is that writing it down there actually somehow validates that the board has already made that decision, that they want to create a policy on trustee sanctions, and that decision hasn't actually come before the board. So I would suggest we strike 5.3 on the references.
Okay, I've got Trustee Duncan and then Trustee Leonard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I actually wanted to amend the motion, the recommended motion.
Where's that?
And so it would read, the amendment would read that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, refer the revised 4304 bullying and harassment policy to the stakeholders and rights holders for their, actually feedback, or requesting their feedback, open to the wording, but hopefully the intention is clear that before we approve anything to go to the board, that we put in place some kind of proactive process to seek that input.
Okay, do I have a seconder, Trustee Whitmer? Yeah, okay.
That's good. That's good advice.
Seconded by Trustee. Okay, Trustee Leonard.
So I'm going to vote against the motion to refer. There are some policies dealing with staff issues and our policy doesn't state that everything goes through the stakeholders and the rights holders, that when it's dealing with staff staff issues such as bullying and harassment, that I don't think it's the purview to have the feedback go through all the rights and stakeholders. So I'm not going to support that at this time. We have done that with lots of our policies, and we have held back some of our other policies that don't meet the recommendation to go to out for feedback. And this, in my mind, is one of those. So I won't be supporting the motion to refer.
Chair, if I may.
Trustee Painter?
I'm just going to quickly say that I too will not be supporting the amendment for the same reasons as Trustee Leonard. I don't think it is appropriate when we have, in my opinion, a policy that very specifically speaks to conditions relative to employees of the district, that it is appropriate to send that policy and regulation out to the public for feedback when, as the province of BC has said very many times recently, we are the employer. This is our work. This is our decision to make. And in my opinion, while there are definitely policies that I think do fit the regulation around public consultation, I do not feel that this is one of them. Thank you.
Chair, point of clarification before we continue to debate.
Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to clarify that what the amendment is referring to is not the policy and consultation, but rather the bylaw on the formulation and development of policy, and which speaks directly to seeking the feedback of stakeholders and rights holders. And in my closing, I will also speak to why this policy in particular, it's very important to seek that feedback, but I'll let the debate continue. I just wanted to clarify that we're not talking about the policy on consultation, but rather the bylaw and the formulation and development of policy.
Okay, I think I still have Trustee Whitaker. Did you want to close on your amendment?
No, I didn't make the amendment. Trustee Duncan did.
Oh, sorry. So you have closed.
You're
Okay.
getting me scared.
Okay.
I'm actually, thanks, Trustee Ferris.
Right.
So I'm going to support this motion because, and I guess for the exact opposite reasons as some are not. For me, when you're talking about bullying and harassment and how we want that handled, I think the more people that you talk to, the more different experiences, challenges, things that worked well, those opportunities for, I mean, all of our employees and employers have all had lots of experiences in their lives and lots of ways that I'm sure that they would like their work to go better, that they would like to see. Everybody experiences conflict and challenges every day in their work, and it's how we have learned to work together. Some of us get better at it. Some have different atmospheres and environments or leaders that help them through, but we've all had experience that help us learn. And I think that's what we're looking for when we send out a document to our other partner groups to go, hey, how does it affect your workers? What would your workers feel would solve something on their end? And how do they feel like they would, is everything in there so that they feel comfortable to come forward and to make known their complaint or what they saw? Like, are we doing everything? And the only way we can do that is by asking. And it doesn't hurt to take the time to get more input on, especially from our partner groups, to say, hey, is this it? Is this everything? So I will support the motion for those reasons.
Okay, seeing no more speakers, and you've spoken twice, Nicole, or not?
Yeah, thanks. I would appreciate that. Yeah. So just briefly in closing, I wanted to just say that in terms of stakeholders and rights holders, it's not just our employees where there's an obligation and responsibility set out in this draft policy that will affect them directly. It's also students, and it's also trustees as well. And so I think that what we want to do, given that our stakeholders and rights holders are not around the table, is to add a layer of, proactive seeking of feedback. Normally, we would get that feedback around our standing committee tables as one, avenue where stakeholders and rights holders could feedback. We don't have the benefit of that feedback loop at the moment. So I think, that also for me is an added, very important reason to be proactive and to seek some feedback directly. So I hope that colleagues will see the benefit in doing so and support the amended motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan. I'd like to call the question. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hands. All those against?
Opposed?
Thank you. And the amendment fails, and we're back to the motion. Elaine, did you want to close on the motion?
I just wanted to say that I know we need to get something on the books that's usable and viable. It doesn't mean it can't come back next year and go through revisions as people see fit. I do agree with Trustee Whitaker at this point in time that number 5.3 under references, I think we should remove that until that's come before the board. So I do agree with that point. So I'd like to carry forward with just that reference coming off. And as the policy committee brings forward things and we talk about that at future meetings, that if something like that is passed, we could add it as a reference later.
Thank you, Trustee Leonard. We will be seeing this motion again at the board, and I tend to agree that we need to get something done here, and no policy is written in stone. So there is always the opportunity to make changes. So I'll call the question on the policy. All those in favor?
Aye.
And the policy passes. Thank you very much to everyone concerned. Nice to get a policy moving along. All right, so I don't see anything else on the agenda. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Aye.
Thank you. Seconded by Trustee Leonard. And good night to everybody.
Good night.